Hello, and welcome to my ongoing seminal series, is Castlevania Dead or Undead, Part 2, The Reckoning. First up, a game truly by the fans, for the fans, Castlevania Rom Hacks. One aspect of influence I don't think gets mentioned enough is the unofficial fan-made Castlevania Rom Hacks. These are the ultimate labors of love which are clearly crafted by fervent fans. These Rom Hacks, most commonly made from retro 8-bit NES games, are made by using the base graphics and mechanics of a given game and rearranging them to create something new. Still based off the source game, but with modified levels and graphical overhauls that make it something different. Sort of like an unlicensed Castlevania Maker. Like Mario Maker, kind of. This one is called Castlevania Orchestra of Despair, based off the OG Castlevania 1 for NES. You can see Simon's modified sprite, as well as the Great Castle ruins against the purple backdrop. Also the use of hunter green and burgundies or maroon that really makes his color scheme pop. Like, I really dig this palette. The author also put little skulls for the health bars, which is just a lovely touch. There's something so artistic and punk rock about creating underground games out of the bones of a mainstream franchise and subverting them to reflect a new vision. These hacks are usually the base game with reformatted levels to create new challenges, some of which actually create new background sprites and even original music, along with color swaps and the like to really add a refreshing sense of vibrance and vibe. A lot of these hacks are challenging as fuck and generally made for fans who have played the base game extensively. Getting these hacks are relatively easy. You just need the base game's ROM file, which I do not condone piracy. But if you happen to somehow have this file of a given game, all you need is the IPS file to patch, which is essentially the mod. You get a simple application you can patch the source ROM with the creator-made IPS file. Lunar IPS is a good program. You can even get an app on your phone to patch the files as well as emulators, so you can literally download, patch, and play all these games on your phone without even needing your computer. One of my personal favorites is known as Castlevania Blood Moon. I love the title screen with its ectoplasm green logo and its short story intro. It almost gives a retro horror movie poster vibe. It's got a stark red theme as you start in the graveyard instead of the normal courtyard entrance. Simon also has a distinctively red tunic as compared to his orange and brown original. Another great hack is Castlevania Chorus of Mysteries. This one has you tackling an ancient pyramid instead of a castle, which in my opinion there isn't nearly enough pyramid dungeons out there, to face the proprietor of the cursed pyramid, Olrox himself, one of Dracula's vampire lieutenants from lore. The color palette is lush in this one as well with the use of teal and yellow. They even give Simon a cool vine whip off the bat, which is another cool touch. There's like 20 of these amazing Castlevania 1 ROM hacks out there. A few bad ones as well. And even a few hacks of CV2 and 3. Castlevania Vengeance of Hell is a Castlevania 2 hack that has Simon in full plate armor, using a longsword instead of a whip as well, trying to find his daughter that was kidnapped by demons. The prose is also a bit more mature, with plot points being much more R-rated than any normal NES game. Definitely more so in the horror vibe, but totally worth checking out. I would totally recommend trying any of these if you dig the classic Vania gameplay and style. There's also other awesome NES ROM hacks like Zelda Outlands, based off the original Zelda 1, but that's for another video. Next, a game a little off the beaten path of the general theme of these videos, Ys Origins of the Ys series. This game is perhaps a bit divergent from the normal Castlevania style formula covered in these videos. However, I really feel that Ys Origins specifically captures the vibe in a multitude of facets, while still being very much its own thing. This game is formatted with 2D sprites against a 3D background, and is executed wonderfully. The environments are actually 3D with the character sprites almost having an isometric look, as they travel in 3 dimensions while still being 2D. The variety of level designs all within this 50-floor tower is immersive. It's kind of like an endurance tower. With hack and slash combat balanced with technical platforming gives you a Vania feel. These amalgamated with the extensive and colorful creature codex, not to mention its vibrantly orchestrated music, is totally in the same vein. You can choose to play as a melee fighter or a caster, and I believe you can unlock a third playable character if you beat the game as both. However, I haven't done that yet. The bosses are nasty and creative, well in line with the abstract monster design. All of this combines to be a pretty challenging foray. If you're especially masochist, you can even try the hard mode, which is like bullet hell level of accuracy required. This game might be my favorite of the Ys series overall, and the closest to really emulating the Castlevania feel in its gameplay mechanics and design. Originally made for the unsung glory that was the PSP, but now it's available on the PS Store, if you want to try it. Up next in the bullpen, Hollow Knight. One of the most artistically driven, well based on my subjective opinion, is the proclaimed Kirbyvania Hollow Knight. This little guy right here is a testament to the OG Metroid structure. It has an entirely hand-drawn art direction, stylized with adorably gloomy characters and setting. The environments are colorfully flourished, separated into different themes that create a mosaic gradient across the world map of Hollow Nest. You're a little bug creature that lives in the integrated world of cute insects that's been corrupted somehow. There are tales of an ancient secret within the depths of Hollow Nest that you're free to investigate, if you feel like it. I like how this game doesn't really have a specified narrative or goal that it pushes you towards in the beginning. Rather, it lets you explore at your whim and discover aspects of the world as you uncover it. Reminds me of Zelda 1 in that way, that it leads you on your own drive to explore instead of attempting to guide you. There's a whole array of insectoids to squish or befriend, and the interaction's actually pretty engaging. It's interesting to see how much personality can be irked out from the voice acting without actually using any words, as all the characters just make different bug noises that somehow totally fleshes out the viable community in this interconnected bug world. This game, I should mention, despite its cutesy soft setting, is tough as rusty nails sometimes. You have to be precise with your spacing of dodges and attacks, and especially with the timing. This game has some precise hitbox dynamics that really is appeasing to retro fans who are used to demanding executions. Some of these bosses are just nasty. You have to analyze their attack patterns, and often they will mix it up or mislead you with certain animations that force you to keep your head in a swivel. I do find it tacky and drab how any game is referred to as the Dark Souls of something just because it's difficult, but there are other aspects of the game that make it much more reflective of the Souls formula, outside of it being hard. Many of which these do reflect. The whole reclaiming of some sort of lost currency tied to your progress after death seems to be one of the most popular mechanics that's been adopted, and Hollow Knight is no different. Here you collect geos. They're used to purchase pretty much everything in the game, as well as your indirect leveling. Since you don't directly level up, the strongest element of actually boosting your character is the charms. You find charms throughout the whole game, either hidden in chambers, from quests, or from buying from specific merchants, and they give you a whole smorgasbord of cool abilities. Either boosting damage, or allowing you to heal faster, or dodge quicker, or even have little familiars that follow you and help fight. You can even combine different charms to have unique builds, one of which makes it so you have the Odor of a Hero that literally makes you stink so much that you cause poison damage. You can add the stink effect to your familiars too, which is great. Little details like the shopkeepers kicking you out for smelling bad is a great attention to detail, as well as it laminates the game's world building, and being funny. And here's the game that inspired it all, Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night. Here's the patron goddess of the Metroidvania personified. However, I thought a little backstory to the inception of this game would be appropriate. Created by Koji Igarashi, the creative mind behind Symphony of the Night, as well as the GBA titles, Circle of the Moon, Harmony of Dissonance, and crowd favorite Aria of Sorrow, as well as the DS titles, which were each a clever iteration on the Metroidvania formula. Dawn of Sorrow, my least favorite, also with the worst art direction, in my opinion, a sequel to Aria of Sorrow where you continue the quest of Dragon Incarnate Soma. Spoilers. The next to come was Portrait of Ruin, where you actually played as two different characters that could be switched between at any time. One a caster and the other a melee fighter. That was apparently the best-selling, as well, of the DS era. And then the last of Koji's Castlevania games, Order of Ecclesia. Well, technically Judgment, but we'll come back to that. This game implemented the glyph system. You only played as one character, the titular Shinoa, but using the glyphs, she was both a melee fighter and a caster, using spells and bound weapons. It was a clever way to utilize the abilities, and it also offered loadouts and options to mix and match different spells and create new compounded glyphs. There's also a traversal-based glyph, like the magnet one, I think it's called Magnus, that can slingshot you, and that was like the best one. This game had a multitude of different environments outside of Dracula's castle as well, that really fleshed out the surrounding Transylvania. I do want to mention that Koji also worked on the PS2 Castlevania titles, Lament of Innocence and Curse of Darkness, that were, in my opinion, totally underrated. Especially the Innocent Devil system, which is essentially like a Pokemon-esque module, where you captured and leveled up monsters to fight for you. There's even an evolution bracket where, based on which gear you had equipped, they would evolve in different directions, which was like super dynamic at the time. You could also forge an array of different weapons and weapon fighting styles that just added to the mix. That versatility of gameplay was not very common in the PS2 era, and I don't think it gets enough credit. Those games totally flew under the radar, and I think they deserve remasters. I'm not the only one, I'm pretty sure. Moving on, Order of Ecclesia was the last of the Castlevania games Koji worked on before he's relegated to working on phone games. He even tried to pitch some concept for a Castlevania mobile game that was rejected by Konami, and he eventually left, along with Hideo Kojima and the public's respect for Konami as a publisher in a well-documented severance. Koji eventually took to Kickstarter to pitch Bloodstained, his own spiritual successor of Metroidvania, and ended up being a wild success that surpassed its goal like 10 times. The fans have spoken, and after years of development, we got Bloodstained Ritual of the Night in the summer of 2019. One thing I would note is the main character Miriam has a striking semblance to Shinoa of Ecclesia. and I feel spiritually is a continuation of her character. The way she absorbs shards she gets from fallen monsters to use as spells is comparable to the glyph system, especially the environmental spells like the Prismatic Ray or the Craftwork Grip. That reminds me of the Magnus glyph, is that it's used to traverse the environment instead of as a weapon. I also wanted to mention that I do love how the intro of Ritual is an orchestral version of the Curse of the Moon 8-bit MIDI theme. After beating Curse in 2018 and first popping in Ritual of the Night in the old PS4 this summer, and then hearing the fully composed version of that same theme, I was almost brought to tears. That was so clever and unexpected, at least to me. The game starts you off on a wrecked ship where you end up facing an NSFW mermaid monster, and you crash ashore to the beginning castle. The world map is direct Vania vibes, with the environs decorated with colorful stained glass and Victorian architecture, lush outside worlds and an ominous moon often above. I appreciate the extra detail they put into this game in rendering its world and monsters, as it looks much more vibrant than it did in its early build. You can customize Miriam's sprite as well as different equipment that actually shows up on her character. The weapon variety is also pretty extensive, leaving you to choose many styles to mix and match the melee and spells. You can also unlock weapon-specific skills that use a button combo to execute, much like Symphony. The monsters are also more colorful and contrasted with Neon as compared to the ancestral counterparts in Castlevania. Speaking of ancestral counterparts, it's really cool seeing the 3D versions of characters, monsters, and settings that were in Curse of the Moon. It's an awesome dynamic to see this world in both 8-bit and modern graphics. Being a fan of retro games and seeing pixels as an art form, it's akin to looking at the same universe but through a lens of parallel dimension. Also, just like Symphony of the Night and Curse of Darkness, this game implements familiars, or innocent devils I guess you could call it. There's a handful of monsters you can defeat and claim as a pet, all of which bolster and help Miriam in different ways, either as added DPS or as buff debuff or other things. My favorite right now is the Silver Knight because you'll tank hits on a whim, often when you most need it. Basically everything about Bloodstained just oozes nostalgia. From the environments, the familiar weapons, the multicultural references exemplified in the equipment, especially the diverse foods, and a mix of old world mythologies in its bestiary, as Castlevania itself was known for. It's a bit glitchy at times, to be honest, especially on the Switch, so I'm told, but it's been getting patched regularly, and for my playthrough on the PS4, I've only had a couple lag issues and no actual game-modifying glitches. There is more DLC to come as well, along with Zangetsu as a playable character, so there is still more content on the horizon. Last but not least to mention, of all the allusions to the Igavania games, the soundtrack of Ritual sticks with me the most. The music has eternal vibes. If you were a fan of the orchestral compositions that was half of the glory of the OG Castlevania games, then Bloodstained will definitely satiate that taste. Now here's a nasty one, Blasphemous. One way to appropriately summarize Blasphemous is gnarly as fuck. This crowd-funded indie game is probably one of the most visceral and gory, as well as one of the most poetic of all the games covered in the series. What began as a Kickstarter game that previewed as a grim and gritty Soulsvania, with an abundance of bloodshed and body horror, grew into this whole other monstrosity entirely. I remember seeing beta versions of this game when it was first announced, and being super intrigued by its gruesome nature, and mature themes while still being a pixelated game. I saw glimpses of gameplay in the next couple years since it got funded, but kind of forgot about it in the foray of all these other glorious indie titles that dropped. Then lo and behold, Blasphemous drops in September of this year, and it's a work of sheer brilliance. This game's art direction and environment was actually inspired by Spanish art from the 1700s, and more specifically the ancient city of Seville in Spain. It's cool to see this rustic and ancient artisan design influence outside of the regular English and Germanic influence often found in fantasy games. Yet again, this game is tougher than rusty nails. Your main defense is utilization of the parry mechanic and patience. You have a whole spread of different upgrades you can apply, ranging from your main leveling abilities to equipping your mea culpa with different adornments, as well as the rosary for another layer of mods. Blasphemous definitely leans a bit more on the Metroidvania side, more so than Dark Souls, which is refreshing in a sense. You don't lose your main currency upon death, however you do lose a piece of yourself, which is your fervor bar, that essentially feeds your skill abilities. Each time you die, you need to return to a point of passing and reclaim your guilt, as it's described in the game. Another thing that is very reflective of the Metroidvania formula, as opposed to Dark Souls, is the visible map. You don't see this as often lately in this grid style, and it's definitely reflective of the genre. I personally love how they use color coordination to separate the different themed areas. This, I think, is something Bloodstained could have honestly really used, although I get the plain blue map is like a staple of the series it's emulating. The monsters almost harken to a Dante's Inferno kind of vibe, where many of these creatures are like dysmorphic naked humans that all seem to be subject to some sort of torture, relative to the Nine Hells. Some are barred in cages or crucified upon barren trees, or forced to carry stone pillars similar to a cross they bear, It's pretty gnarly, and to me emanates a biblical fire and brimstone feel that is really conducive to the themes of the game. Let's not forget Dark Souls and Bloodborne. I didn't want to delve too deep into already covered ground, but I did want to touch base on how many consider Dark Souls and Bloodborne by the creative mind Hideki Miyazaki to be the true modern AAA spiritual successor to Castlevania. The expansive horror themes is palpable in these games. It's been said ad hominem, but the decrepit and expansive environments in these games, the technically calculated level design, the dilapidated ruins and a forsaken kingdom or Victorian city left to decay really build a spooky vibe that is unmatched in any third-person action RPG since. The monsters are clever and the bosses instill a feeling of fear each time you face them. It's truly reflective of the anxiety and horror atmosphere that the original Castlevania had built. Thanks again for watching. Part 2 of my cinema series is Castlevania Dead or Undead. I plan on doing more, stretching the boundaries of what qualifies the criteria of the Castlevania genre. Things like The Messenger or perhaps Bastion. Maybe even more youth series, who knows. But thanks again for watching, and I hope you have a happy and safe Halloween.